The train moved slowly through the mountains, cutting across the frozen landscape like a lonely silver snake. Snow covered the trees, rooftops, and silent roads of northern Colorado. Inside the train, passengers sat quietly, lost in their own thoughts while soft jazz music played through hidden speakers. At the very back of the train sat a young man named Daniel Reed. Daniel was 30 years old, intelligent, handsome, and deeply exhausted from life. For years, he had worked as a successful architect in New York City. People admired his creativity, his expensive suits, and his luxurious lifestyle, but nobody knew how empty he felt inside. 2 years earlier, Daniel had lost the love of his life, Emily, in a tragic accident. Since then, nothing felt meaningful anymore. He stopped smiling genuinely, stopped dreaming, stopped believing happiness could return. So when his company offered him a temporary project in a quiet mountain town called Silver Pine, he accepted immediately. He wanted distance from noise, memories, and the painful life he had built in New York. As the train approached Silver Pine Station, heavy snow continued falling from the dark evening sky. Daniel grabbed his coat and stepped outside. Cold wind hit his face instantly. The town looked peaceful. Small wooden houses glowed with warm yellow lights. Snow rested gently on rooftops. Smoke rose from chimneys into the winter air. For the first time in months, Daniel felt silence instead of pressure. A taxi driver helped him with his luggage. "You here for vacation?" the driver asked. "Work," Daniel answered quietly. The old driver smiled. "Silver Pine changes people." Daniel looked out the window without replying. He did not believe places could heal broken hearts. But he was wrong. The next morning, Daniel visited the old hotel where he would stay for several months. The hotel was called the Winter Crown. It was beautiful, traditional, and peaceful. Wooden floors creaked softly beneath his shoes. Fireplaces burned warmly in every hallway. The scent of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. And behind the reception desk stood a woman named Clara Bennett. She had soft blonde hair tied loosely behind her shoulders, bright blue eyes, and a smile so natural it felt like sunlight after years of darkness. "Welcome to the Winter Crown," she said warmly. Daniel nodded politely. "I'm Daniel." Clara handed him his room key. "You're staying in room 214, best mountain view in the hotel." "Thank you." As Daniel turned to leave, Clara suddenly added, "You look like someone who forgot how to rest." Daniel paused slightly. "That obvious?" Clara smiled gently. "Only to people who have felt the same." Those words stayed in Daniel's mind all evening. Days passed quietly. Daniel spent most mornings working on architectural designs, while snowstorms moved across the mountains outside his window. But slowly, he began noticing Clara everywhere. She laughed with guests like she had known them forever. She carried warmth into every room she entered. And despite always smiling, her eyes sometimes carried hidden sadness. One evening, Daniel sat alone near the hotel fireplace reading documents when Clara approached him holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look miserable," she joked softly. Daniel almost smiled. "Long day." Clara handed him coffee. "Long lives are harder." Daniel looked at her carefully. "You speak like someone who's survived something." For a moment, silence appeared between them. Then Clara sat beside him. "My husband died 3 years ago." Daniel's expression softened immediately. "I'm sorry." "So am I." The fire crackled quietly nearby. Daniel looked down at his coffee. "My fiancé died too." Clara turned toward him slowly. Neither of them spoke after that. Because some pain does not need explanation. Only understanding. That night became the beginning of something unexpected. Over the following weeks, Daniel and Clara spent more time together. Sometimes they walked through snowy streets after dinner. Sometimes they talked for hours inside the hotel cafe, while storms raged outside. And sometimes they simply sat together in silence, watching snow fall from the sky. The strange thing about grief is that lonely people often recognize each other immediately. One afternoon, Clara took Daniel to a frozen lake outside town. Children laughed nearby while skating across the ice. "You should skate," Clara said. Daniel shook his head. "I'll fall. That's part of learning." Reluctantly, Daniel stepped onto the ice. And within seconds, he slipped badly. Clara burst into laughter. Real laughter. The kind that comes from deep inside the soul. Daniel looked up from the ice, embarrassed. But then something unexpected happened. He laughed too, for the first time in nearly 2 years. The sound surprised even him. Clara smiled softly. "There you are." Daniel stared at her. "What?" "The real you." Something warm moved quietly through his chest. That evening, Daniel realized healing does not arrive loudly. Sometimes it enters life gently, disguised as small moments. As winter deepened, their bond became stronger. Daniel began helping Clara repair parts of the old hotel. Together they painted walls, fixed broken furniture, and decorated the lobby for Christmas. Guests often teased them. "You two look like a movie couple," an old woman said one morning. Clara blushed slightly. Daniel smiled awkwardly. But inside, both of them were beginning to feel something dangerous. Hope. One snowy evening, Daniel discovered Clara crying alone near the storage room behind the kitchen. He approached quietly. "Clara." She quickly wiped her tears. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." For a few seconds she tried to stay strong. Then suddenly she broke down. "My husband and I plan to renovate this hotel together," she whispered through tears. "After he died, I tried doing everything alone." Daniel gently held her shoulders. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore." Clara looked at him emotionally. "You say that now, but people leave." Daniel's face became serious. "I know." The pain inside his voice felt real. Deep. Honest. Clara slowly leaned against him, and for the first time in years, both of them allowed themselves to feel safe beside another person. Christmas arrived with heavy snowfall and glowing lights across Silver Pine. The town looked magical. One night, the hotel organized a Christmas dinner for guests. Music played softly, while people laughed near fireplaces and decorated trees. Daniel wore a black suit. Clara wore a dark red dress that made her look breathtaking. When she entered the dining hall, Daniel forgot how to breathe for a moment. Clara noticed. "You're staring. You're beautiful." She smiled shyly. Later that evening, slow music began playing. Daniel looked at her carefully. "Dance with me." Clara hesitated. "I haven't danced since." "You don't have to finish that sentence." After a moment, she placed her hand in his. They moved slowly together beneath warm golden lights, while snow fell outside the windows. For a few minutes, pain disappeared. The world disappeared. Only the music remained, and the feeling of two broken hearts learning how to beat again. But healing is never simple. A week later, Daniel received a call from New York. His company wanted him back permanently. The promotion was massive. More money. More success. Everything he once wanted. But suddenly, none of it felt important. That night, Daniel sat alone outside the hotel while snow covered the silent streets. Clara found him there. "What happened?" Daniel looked troubled. "They want me back in New York." Clara's smile faded slightly. "Oh." Silence filled the cold air. "You should go," she said softly. Daniel stared at her. "Do you want me to?" Clara looked away. "My feelings shouldn't decide your future." Daniel stood up slowly. "What if you are my future?" Clara's eyes filled with emotion immediately. But fear remained stronger. "You'll regret staying here someday." "No. You think that now because you're healing." Daniel moved closer. "No, I think that because I love you." The words hung between them in the freezing air. Clara's breath trembled slightly. "You don't mean that?" "Yes, I do." She stepped backward, emotionally overwhelmed. You loved someone else once. Daniel nodded quietly. I did. Then how can you love me too? Daniel looked at her with painful honesty. Because love doesn't erase the past, it teaches the heart how to grow around it. Tears rolled down Clara's cheeks. Nobody had ever explained love to her that way before. But fear still controlled her heart. The next morning, Clara avoided him completely. Daniel spent the entire day restless and confused. Finally, late at night, the hotel manager approached him. She went to the old chapel. Daniel immediately grabbed his coat and rushed outside into the snowstorm. Wind howled violently across the empty streets as he climbed the hill toward the small wooden chapel overlooking Silver Pine. Inside, Clara sat alone in darkness. Candles flickered softly around her. Daniel walked closer carefully. You disappeared. Clara wiped tears from her face. I'm scared. Of what? Loving someone again. Daniel sat beside her quietly. For years, Clara whispered, I thought surviving grief meant never opening my heart again. Daniel looked toward the glowing candles. I thought the same. She turned toward him. What changed? Daniel smiled sadly. You. Clara closed her eyes emotionally. I don't want to lose someone again. Daniel gently held her hand. You can spend your whole life hiding from pain and still end up lonely. The chapel remained silent except for the storm outside. Then Daniel whispered softly, but love is worth the risk. Clara finally broke completely. She hugged him tightly while crying against his chest. And Daniel held her like someone protecting the most precious thing in the world. Weeks later, Daniel officially rejected the New York promotion. Instead, he decided to stay in Silver Pine permanently. Together, he and Clara began renovating the Winter Crown Hotel. Slowly, the old place transformed beautifully. Tourists returned. The hotel became famous again. But more importantly, it became home. One spring morning, after months of rebuilding both the hotel and themselves, Daniel took Clara to the frozen lake where they had first laughed together. The snow had melted now. Flowers surrounded the water. Sunlight reflected beautifully across the surface. Clara smiled. It looks completely different. Daniel nodded. So do we. Then he reached into his pocket slowly. Clara's eyes widened immediately. Daniel knelt down beside the lake. Before you, he said softly, I believed grief was the end of love. Tears filled Clara's eyes. But you taught me something beautiful. Hearts don't heal because they forget. They heal because they learn to love again. He opened the small ring box carefully. Clara Bennett, will you marry me? Clara began crying before he even finished speaking. Yes. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, while sunlight shimmered across the water around them. Months later, the entire town attended their wedding inside the Winter Crown Hotel. Music filled the halls. Snow no longer covered Silver Pine. Spring flowers bloomed everywhere. And for the first time in many years, Daniel truly felt alive. Late that night, after everyone left, Clara and Daniel stood together outside the hotel beneath the stars. Clara leaned against him softly. Do you think broken people can ever become whole again? Daniel kissed her forehead gently. No. She looked confused. Daniel smiled. I think they become stronger. Far above them, stars glowed quietly over the mountains. And inside the warm golden light of the Winter Crown Hotel, two wounded souls finally found peace not by forgetting their pain, but by choosing love despite it.